Hello, I'm Jim Miller. I'm here with Ron Bowers and Henry House. The Flip Side starts right now. Welcome to the show. Well, they say the view is good from the cheap seats, and I think at some level that is proven true by the fact that we see all of this information on politics posted on social media, and I think it's fair to say, Henry, that not all of it is true. Well, we're here tonight to get the truth, at least about Washington County. We're pleased to have with us Commissioner Wayne Kiefer. Wayne, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Jim, thanks for having me.
So I guess the topic that we'd like to start off with tonight, and we're going to do two blocks. We'll talk about Fort Ritchie as part of the first block, and then we'll get into some more specific county issues. Just on an overview basis, what can you tell us about Fort Ritchie and what's happening and what the plans are there?
Well, I think maybe the biggest developments to take place in the last few weeks since the new board convened was listing the property online for sale for the first time. So we're refocusing more effort on some domestic and stateside opportunities to develop the base. We now have a new real estate agent on board on our county commissioner, so he brings a wealth of expertise to help us out with marketing the property ourselves.
Okay, perfect. Ron?
Commissioner, bring us up to date. Fort Ritchie, Cascade, JGBLI. Separated out, what is it really? People hear so many different things. What are we really dealing with now?
Yeah. So the Fort Ritchie Army base that closed down about 2 decades ago, give or take, was a 600 plus or minus acre parcel property that when the BRAC realignments took place in the late 90s, that property closed down. And we had an entity, a group called Penmar Development Corporation that marketed the property for many years. And then back into several years ago, a couple years ago, before my tenure on the board, the county was approached by a group called JGBLI, JG Business Link International, a firm out of Montgomery County, Maryland, that looks to develop properties, and they bring in their interest and their expertise from South Korea. So they bring in some foreign investment for the property. And we've tried with that plan, and we're still moving forward with that plan since 2016. We've been in an agreement with JGBLI under Master Developer Agreement, and they're trying to help us come up with a prospective use for the property. So that's where we are right now. We're still trying to find an end user for the property, whether it's one user or multiple users that could take ownership of the property, develop it, create businesses, housing opportunities, and so forth, and try and bring that back on the tax rolls for Washington County.
Can you explain to those watching that what the Penmar Development Corporation was? It was established by the state. How much money did they turn over to the county to run the base until a buyer or a developer took over, and what's the status of that money now?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Penmar Development Corporation was a body that was created by the Maryland General Assembly to actively promote the Army base. And that was dissolved also by an act of the General Assembly in their 2017 session. The property was transferred to county government at that time, along with a balance of about $3 million that was remaining in that fund. And out of that $3 million, the county has used that to actively promote the Army base. You may have be familiar with some of the trips that were taken to South Korea for business development purposes. That didn't come out of the taxpayer general fund, our taxpayer account. That came out of the Fort Ritchie or Penmar fund, as we call it. The balance is now down to right around $1 million. I believe in April of next year the funds will run out based on the current rate of consumption that we're using. We spend about $70,000 a month to maintain the property. That includes salaries for the employees, the basic maintenance and upkeeps. There's an active water and sewer system on the property, so that has some expense that goes along with it.
Now, does that include running the community center, and will you retain with this $3.5 million the community center that is there, and you can tie all of that in with the 60 to 63 acres of land that JGBLI has. Will that change at all? With those
Well,
couple questions.
you have a couple loaded questions right there. The Fort Ritchie Community Center, I think, in my opinion, is a star piece of real estate at the Fort Ritchie in the Fort Ritchie community. It's used by many people in the Cascade community. They love the property. We fund, in years past, the county has provided a subsidy to the Fort Ritchie Community Center of about $170,000 a year, and that money was coming out of the Penmar funds as well. This current year in our budget cycle, we are providing a subsidy of $150,000, so it's $20,000 less, because their revenues are starting to increase, and they've been very active in some campaigning work to bring in some revenues. So long-term going forward, the Fort Ritchie Community Center is going to be an important part of that property for the community, for the residents. They offer a lot of academic programs, so we need to make sure that it remains viable, and I think it will be.
But it's not going to be a part of the sale. It's going to remain more or less as it is today, correct?
That's right. We are carving out around 3 acres, give or take, of the community center, the property and the parking lot that will be dedicated to the community center. So whether the community center might take it on themselves as a separate 501c3 nonprofit, which they are, or if it continues to be owned by county government, the property will be separate from the sale. That's not the same with the parade grounds necessarily, but the property that the community center on will remain separate.
So there was a lot of talk about the parade grounds as well.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about the status of the parade grounds and how they play into this?
Sure. So the parade grounds is steeped in history during the Fort Ritchie Army base's time over the last several decades. And the Maryland Historic Trust has an easement on those parade grounds. So I believe there's a chapel on the property now, but other than that, the green space that's there can't be developed.
Okay.
It's undevelopable. So in my opinion, and speaking with the residents in the Cascade community and the Fort Ritchie Community Center, because it's park space, it can't be built. We can't have infrastructure business take place on the parade grounds. It really lends itself more to being park space than commercial property. So I have a hope, a goal that we can incorporate that into the community center as well. It's used for a variety of reasons: triathlons, car shows, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts camp there, different activities to benefit the community center and the public at large. So it's used by the community center, and I've been approached by several members that they would like to make sure that it remains accessible to the public.
Okay, very good. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
No, turn it over to Henry.
Okay. Back in the newspapers, I guess it was, a few months ago, there was an individual possibly interested in developing the site. Has anything come to fruition with them, or can you speak to that?
Sure. So what I can speak to is some things that have happened since then, especially in the last month or so. Since the property, we've received some more media attention that the property is for sale. We've come up with a price to list it for. There's been a huge amount of interest domestically for the property. And I know those calls are being queried through to our Economic Development Director, and JGBLI is taking those calls. So there's a great amount of interest in the property. You're correct, there was a gentleman several months ago who expressed an interest. To my understanding, the interest is still there. What we are requiring through our master development agreement with JGBLI is an 11-point proposal. So we have 11 points of consideration, including financial information, proposed use. We want to make sure that whatever the outcome is for the property, that it's appropriate for the community. So we have 11 pieces of information that we need from everyone who would submit a proposal for the property. We haven't received that yet, so that's what we would be waiting on.
Now, as a county commissioner, what is your vision? What would be a really tangible benefit to the Cascade community for this redevelopment?
Yeah, well, first of all, we want to make sure that whatever becomes of that property, it's a good fit for the community. So we need to make sure that there's community buy-in, that the community appreciates what might go there. Also important, of course, we need something that will hopefully create jobs. That's important in our economy, the economy nationwide. So different ideas have been tossed around and talked about. Some create more jobs than others. So a proposal that creates jobs would be very important. Also, something that will help to grow the tax base. So right now the property, it's owned by county government. It's not generating tax revenue at this time, obviously. So the end user being able to develop and build out the property and generate and grow the tax base will have a direct benefit on the Cascade community as well, and all of Washington County.
You mentioned that the parade grounds had an easement from Maryland Historic Trust. Are there any other buildings, specifically the finger buildings, but are there any other buildings generally that have issues that are going to prevent them from being developed in a way that you think might be beneficial?
Yeah. Well, I think the historic easements that's on the property pretty much covers all of the stone structures.
Okay.
So the finger buildings that you mentioned, the building that looks like a castle, the
Right.
Gentleman's Club, I believe it was referred to as one time, those properties are protected under a historic easement, which basically means from the outside they have to maintain their historical integrity. They'll have to look like they did many years ago. On the inside, you can add as much technology as you want pretty much, but on the outside, it has to remain historically accurate. I don't think that would be a detriment to selling the property. I think that might be a benefit to retain some of that nostalgia. I think that would be, that's a big thing right now. So I don't think that would pose any burden on the property.
In your vision, looking at because there was residential development on there, and I understand some of those houses, some of those units have fallen in state of disrepair over
Yes.
years. But in your vision, the percentage of commercial build versus residential build, do you have a feel for what you think that might be or should be?
Well, JGBLI has come up with a very nice conceptual plan. Nothing's written in stone, but basically 1/3 is residential of the 600 acres. 1/3 would be residential, 1/3 would be commercial or business use, 1/3 might be recreational use. So that's the mix that we're looking at. Again, we're not saying it has to look like
Right.
that, but that's just one of the conceptual plans that I think has been shared with the community and has been appreciated.
Can you tell me where the starting price of $3.5 million, where did that come from and what is the basis for that?
Yeah, absolutely. So through our staff, we have a couple real estate agents, former real estate agents on staff and on the commission. 3 comparable, and I use that word loosely, comparable properties were found because Fort Ritchie is very unique.
Yes, it is.
So some comparable properties were found, and we factored into the fact that this property is not located right off the interstate. There's not immediate interstate access. So that affected the price a little bit. There's some infrastructure improvements that need to be taken into consideration, so that brought the price down a little bit. So $3.5 million was a price that we felt comparable properties, and including those adjustments, would be appropriate. The $6 million price tag that was talked about from last year, that was an offer that was made to us, almost unsolicited, an offer to buy the entire property. So that $6 million wasn't a figure that we came up with at that time, just to be clear about that, because some folks have made mention that there's been a drop in the price, and that's why.
And that was exactly my point. I've heard that question as well, so I wanted to get that out on the table. Henry.
Infrastructure, if we take 1/3 of that property and we develop it for homes, how is the Cascade community set up, because of like Cascade Elementary and the other facilities they have there, how are they equipped to handle the additional increase in residents?
Yeah, so as we've been told, this development project will take the same methodology that we use on other community housing development projects. So when the developer comes in and they build the housing, they build the businesses, they have to get the infrastructure up to par. So if it's the roads, the water lines, the sewer lines, that'll be their responsibility to get that up to county standards. And then that will be incorporated as part of the county infrastructure.
Okay. Well, I'm talking about the resources. I mean, I know we have roads, schools, because Cascade students go down to Smithsburg for middle and high school, but for the elementary, I mean, it's beneficial. I know the center that we have up there is a tremendous asset to the community for additional education resources for the kids.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're absolutely right. We need to make sure that what is built up there, if we have a large housing segment, if it's maybe more than 1/3 that we were anticipating or that we have projected, we need to make sure that that will impact the Smithsburg area as well. That will impact their roads, their schools, and so we need to make sure that APFO fees are brought up to speed and paid so we can cover those costs.
Formerly, the people who worked up at Cascade, when it was a base, their students were part of the school system, but again, that was nearly 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So the plans within the school system have modified since then, and we have shifted students around. I'm concerned about the census and that we have the best provided resources to not just Cascade, but to every citizen in Washington County. I'm sure you are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let me chime in a little bit on the school. There was a proposal that never made it to the light of day that there would be a somewhat like a gated community, like a Summerlin, that would be located up there, a retirement type community where the way you got in, which there's no school requirements.
Right.
And that fell on deaf ears, and a lot of people always want to know why, and I'm not going to ask that question here why, because I pretty much know why, or how it never was brought to the light of day. But there has been people that want to build a retirement type community on the base itself. Is JGBLI the only person that can develop as it is now through contractual language, or can somebody else do it? Do they have a sole right, sole source to develop the community, or can you say, here's your 63 acres you have, goodbye?
Yeah. So JGBLI, the way I would refer to them is they act as more like a real estate broker for the county and economic development engine. They will go out and seek
Sole
that
source? Are they
entity.
sole source?
No.
Are the only one can bring somebody to the table?
Absolutely not. So some of the offers that we've received recently from news in the newspaper that you may have seen about with the $3.5 million price tag, that's brought in outside interest. And if I could also make a point of the 63 acres, you asked a question earlier, and I didn't get to comment on that. The 63 acres was given by the county commissioners a couple years ago. I was actually the only commissioner who voted no on that transfer. That's a prime piece of real estate on that property. So my hope is that if a developer or an opportunity would come across for us to sell the entire property, that might be included in the sale as well.
I'm going to ask you a question. You don't have to answer it. Was it turned over to JGBLI or another entity when the county turned it over?
It was turned over to JGBLI. I believe the current holder of that deed is a subsidiary of the company. So I think it was in keeping with the spirit of the transfer. But point well taken.
We've gotten a lot of good information on Fort Ritchie. I hope as additional developments come through, you'll come back and visit us again on that.
Absolutely.
And if you don't mind, I'd like to hold you over for another segment, because there's other parts of the county that we should probably talk about.
I'll wait here.
All right, excellent. Stay with us. When we come back after the break, we'll talk with Wayne Kiefer about some other parts of Washington County. We're back in 3 minutes.
Did you know that Wi-Fi connects multiple devices in your home? So go ahead. Surf, game, or simply watch your favorite shows and movies anywhere in the house on any device. With Wi-Fi, your house becomes a high-tech home.
Unleash the internet in your home with Antietam Ultra Wireless Home Network. With speeds up to 1 gig, your whole family can surf together faster. We make it easy with our hassle-free professional installation. Call Antietam Broadband today and add a Wi-Fi modem free for 60 days.
For more than 10 years, the University System of Maryland at Hagerstown has been providing a local higher education option for students in the Quad State region. With more than 20 undergraduate and graduate programs from 6 Maryland State universities, there are many opportunities to earn your degree while saving on the cost of commuting.
Financial benefits to attending the program have been significant.
USMH. Academic excellence, outstanding value.
Welcome back. Well, we're going to continue our conversation with Commissioner Wayne Kiefer. Wayne, thank you again for joining us.
Absolutely.
We talked about Fort Ritchie. There's a whole another section of the county, though, that we need to talk about. Tell us generally what's great in Washington County these days.
Well, of course, I may be a little biased, but I think Washington County is a great county. We're very large, about 150,000 citizens, 9 incorporated municipalities, and we have a lot going on. And one thing I think is important to talk about, at our last commissioner meeting, we agreed unanimously to form an ad hoc committee to look at our ethics ordinance in the county. And I think this is important. During my tenure as a commissioner for about 3 years now, I've heard comments about how the county might need to revamp our ethics ordinance. We've had some cases gone before them that brought about some headlines and some questions from the citizens. So we want to make sure that our ethics ordinance is up to snuff and up to par. So the last time our ethics ordinance received an update was in 2011. So it's been about 8 years. In 3 terms of commissioner, so I think it's time to update our ethics ordinance. So we are forming an ad hoc committee with 3 at-large citizen members, up to 3. We will have a former county judge serve on the panel, along with a member to represent the Washington County MML, the Maryland Municipal League. MACO, Maryland Association of Counties, will have a representative, as well as a member of the press. I thought it would be important to have a member of the press there. It could be a current member of the press, maybe a retired member of the press, maybe a journalism student, but someone to represent the media, because most of the Public Information Act requests that we get come from the press and the media, and they would be the most critical of the commissioners or anybody that the Ethics Commission has oversight with if something doesn't appear right. So I'm very excited about that panel that will be convening together soon. They will have 90 days once they're formed to come up with some suggestions to revise our ethics ordinance to include things like how members are appointed, what issues should be brought up. Right now we accept the state of Maryland's very minimum standards and requirements for an ethics violation, which is financial gain only. And I think, as we all know and realize, that a breach of ethics can involve more than just financial gain. So we want to make sure that we're covered in different ways. There's also been talk about our county attorney as the attorney that's the representative to our Ethics Commission. And is that appropriate, since the county attorney ultimately reports to the commissioners? So could that create a conflict of interest? So we want to be a very transparent county government, and I'm looking forward to see what the recommendations might be.
Good. Ron?
We attended a coalition, with the chamber puts together, Greater Hagerstown, a coalition, and there was talk that day about, one of the budget folks talked about this year's budget was going through pretty good, but next year will be a tough budget year. That's in the state, and they talked about that months ago. Mm-hmm. How do you see a 2020 budget here? The budget now, you've got to deal with that, but how do you see the budget next year? What does budget look like in the future? Because sometimes in the past, we could have give numbers that were far too high, forecast out far too far for revenue, overestimated potential revenue. That's coming home to bite us. That's my opinion. What do you see now from this year to 2020 and to what's happening in the state?
Yeah, well, I think one of the biggest state issues to face our budget right now is Kerwin, and that's a big unknown. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of information on the Kerwin Commission right now, but the last estimates that I heard would be the entire Kerwin Commission package might cost upwards of $4.4 billion, and it's unknown how that would be divided between the state and the county responsibility. So that's a huge infusion of money and cash and resources into education. That hopefully next legislative cycle we'll learn more about that. One thing that's really hurt our budget over the years, not just this current year but over the last several years, is the decline in highway user revenues, and that's slowly starting to be built back up. So highway user revenues are taxes you pay whether it's at the pump or through the registration of your vehicles. That money comes back to counties and municipalities to build roads that we drive on. And our high water mark at one time was $9 million a year is what we were getting from the state, and that's been cut back to as low as $900,000 a year, so a 90% cut. So trying to incorporate and feel that in our budget has been difficult. So I think those are probably 2 of the biggest issues that we're grappling with right now. One is known, and there's a few unknown issues yet as of right now.
You going to tackle fire and rescue this year, or you going to let it go?
So fire and rescue,
kick it down the road again, or are they going to deal with it?
So I'm very proud with what our commission did just a few weeks ago to apply for the SAFER grant. Keep in mind the SAFER grant only applies to the firefighters, not EMS or EMT workers, but the firefighters. So we're applying for a grant that covers a portion of the cost, and it steps down over a 3 or 4 year period. We've applied for a grant to fund 29 new firefighters in the county, and I think that'll be a huge boost in the arm to our fire stations that are struggling. Again, we still have the EMS side to deal with too. The EMS side is equally as important, and they need some help too. So we'll be dealing with that soon too. But we've taken tremendous steps forward in the right direction, I believe.
Talk about maintenance of effort. Okay, the Marshall County Board of Education is, I believe, one of the largest parts of county government, and they have mandated by the state a maintenance of effort. every year it seems like they want to ask for above what the maintenance of effort is. What's your opinion, and how can the county help with some of the infrastructure issues that the board has, and how can we work together to try to get things better for them?
So just so our viewers know, maintenance of effort basically in a nutshell says whatever we spend per pupil the year before, we can't go below that amount. So we have to spend that amount or more. And I believe the number is around $4,000 or $5,000 per student that we spend in Washington County per student. It's around $100 million a year. And with the Kerwin Commission, that formula might be changed a little bit, so we don't know if we'll be dealing with maintenance of effort. It kind of handicaps us in a way, because there's times maybe in budget cycles where we may have extra funds to spend, but we know if we put it into education, we're committed and we're locked in forever and ever with that. So one thing that we've been able to do to help out with that is work on the CIP side of the budget. So right now, in our last budget cycle, actually last year, something that the county commissioners did was agree to fully leverage state funds. We had to chip in a little bit more into our CIP budget for infrastructure improvements. That could be building new schools, that could be roof replacements, HVAC replacements, basically the hard components of the school buildings, not the salaries and teachers and school books. So we're putting more money into our CIP budget than ever before for school improvements, and we're leveraging more state tax dollars than ever before too. So that's a wise move that I think we were able to make that falls outside of maintenance of effort.
So let me just clarify something, because I think you made an important point there. So if I have an extra $1 million in the budget this year and I put it to the school, then I've committed myself to that forever and ever, even though
unless
I probably...
it's CIP.
Right, unless it's CIP, right. But that's my point. So it actually kind of restrains you from using extra funds towards the school system, because now you've committed yourself to raise that level. So in that case, the maintenance of effort actually works against our school system.
I think it does serve as a detriment. I think it can hold the commissioners back from wanting to contribute a little more during budget cycles that are a little more generous to us. And that's absolutely right. So for example, money that we give through CIP is not calculated into that, but if we gave an extra $1 million on the operating side of our budget, that $1 million becomes part of the school board's operating budget. Our budget goes up and down. It varies from year to year. Property values fluctuate, income levels fluctuate, so the amount of revenue that we as a county generate each year is different. But a hard dollar amount that goes to the Board of Education, that remains the same.
So the maintenance of effort, I know it's based on dollars, but is that calculated by per students? Because obviously the student population fluctuates as well. So if all of a sudden we have 10% less students, I'm assuming the maintenance of effort goes down by way of the fact that we don't have as many students.
That's right. It's based on a per student basis. In my tenure on the board, I think we've had one year where we've gone backwards in the number of students in our schools, but typically we always increase our number of students in the school system. So
we've got about a minute left. Can you talk to us about any long-term projects or initiatives that are worth highlighting here?
Yeah, one project I think is very important is the relocation of the C&O Canal Park Service into Williamsport. I think is a fantastic project. It's been many years in the making, as I understand. That is a project that has about $17 million worth of investment into the town of Williamsport. It'll bring some jobs to Washington County, mainly jobs from the Georgetown area, where a lot of the C&O Canal Park Service, some of them work. It'll bring those into the community. The number of tourists and visitors that it will bring into Washington County, not just Williamsport, and not just up and down the canal from Hancock, where I live, to Sharpsburg, but all over the county. It will be a huge boom to our local economy.
Well, and you got to think that Williamsport's going to see some development in their town with restaurants and other facilities to service these either employees or new tourist base that are coming in.
Absolutely, and it's been a great partnership with different levels of government. So the county currently owns the property where the C&O Canal Park Service is to be built. The C&O Canal Parks, as you know, is an entity at the federal level of government, and we receive funding to purchase the property through the state of Maryland. So it's in the town of Williamsport is all behind it as well. So yeah, 4 levels of government working together. Doesn't happen very often.
Great. Last question I'm going to ask, and this is the political one. And again, I know some people like some commissioners and not others. I think we probably all have those lists in our head, but and we certainly lost some skills when we lost John Barr and others from the commissioner. That everybody brings a set of skills to the table. The new commissioners that have joined this time, What skill sets do you believe they've really added that will benefit the county? You mentioned about the realtor background. Are there any others you can point to in terms of additional skill sets that are now there?
Well, I think we're varied in our skill sets, but maybe more important, or just as important or more important, we're also varied in our age like never before. So I'm the youngest county commissioner at 33 years of age. Commissioner Monschmidt is the second youngest. Before our new board took office, I was half the age of the next youngest commissioner. So we're bringing in a new age set into the county government, which I think is important. So everyone is looking at the long-term future of county government, but maybe us more so, even because we're going to live here longer. So I think that's a great dynamic that isn't talked about enough.
Okay. Ron or Henry, anything else that you need to?
I'll just home rule, yes or no?
I'm comfortable with the form of county government we have
Okay.
right now.
Okay. Excellent.
Checks and balances.
Checks and balances, absolutely. We could always do better with that. And I think maybe through our ethics commission that might help us out.
Henry, home rule or not?
I'm not in favor of it.
And I'm not in favor of it either. Jim?
I'm in favor. Sorry,
3
guys.
to 1.
3 to 1, I lost that one. And I'll take the last word on that. Coming up next, we're going to have another guest. Mr. Pat Mayhew will be here and talk to us about the positive side of social media. Stay tuned for that report just after the break. Welcome back. Well, once again, we have a guest with us. Pat Mayhew is here. Pat, we want to talk to you about the positive side of social media. You started a page, and it started out small, and I saw it stay small for a while, and now it's just taking off like gangbusters.
Well,
Talk to us about your inspiration for starting that page.
Well, thank you for having me. I think that's a wonderful thing. I think this message needs to get out. We've got a really strong group, and this group has exploded. In fact, shortly we will be in Facebook's top 10 in the nation as far as our growth.
Wow.
We've been growing weekly, and we've got a real good secret about that.
And what is the name of the group?
It's Our Hagerstown Times, and that's TYMES.
And what is the focus of that group?
The focus of that group is the kitchen table.
Okay. All right, that's an interesting way to put it.
Okay.
That's a good way to put it. We stay positive. We honor our community. We honor the past. We value the present. And we're all looking forward to the future. And we do that around what we call our kitchen table. And that's the message we get out to our members, that the kitchen table is a place where you respect one another. Where when a family sits down and they speak from the heart. And, you know, they enjoy the dinner.
Okay. Interesting, Ron.
You've been in this for a while. How do you choose your stories? Do you have a little group that looks at it? Do you do it? Do you and Connie do it? Or how do you determine what you're going to put in when you leave here tonight?
Well, when I put our group together, and our group started a few years ago. We started in another little town called Monaca. It's my hometown. It's from the other side of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And we started to try to save an indent on the front of our high school. And we learned that by being positive, we could make some inroads. The more we did this, the more friends we got. And we sat down one day, Connie, a few from Monaca, a few from here in Hagerstown, and we said, how could we make a group that would be kind of like the old-time version of the mail? My mother used to get 6 and 8, 10-page letters from home. And I thought, oh, if we would have had social media then, what we would have avoided. We would have avoided those arguments through the mail because we would have been almost face-to-face. So that's how we got started. And then we started thinking, you know, everybody loves their hometown. But a lot of people never get a say. They never get an idea of what they want to hear. So we started with, oh, well, you tell me what you like. After we went from what you like, I started what's called a TTS. In fact, Ron, I think you were a TTS. I think, Jim, you were a TTS.
I was.
It's a tri-state twinkling star. And it doesn't mean a darn thing. What it means is we want to say hi to a neighbor.
Is the Indian still on the school?
The Indian is still on the school. And last year, in this, which is a really interesting story, they got bought out. In this time and age, government buys things and they forget about the past. They bought a little school. It had a huge indent on the front of it, in mosaic, beautiful indent head. And they covered it with a vinyl covering. Why they would take in a public piece of art and covered it up with vinyl covering. Our group has had that uncovered 3 times in the last 7 years, which it had never been done before. For our picnic last year, they uncovered it in our honor. So it's, in fact, we do those picnics. We have a picnic coming up here at this summer. We'll have it in Williamsport. Last year, we had it out at Black Rock Park. We also write stories. I write stories. We have a Did You Know column where Connie will come up with the origin of the zipper. And people will get to put that on. We have a historic researcher. He researches all the buildings in the area and all the old historic photographs. He puts them on, he analyzes them, and then he checks them for facts.
How you keep everything positive? How you keep your message positive? What do you do with somebody that comes in and starts to nitpick an issue?
Haven't had one.
You know, and I was wondering about that because I've not seen one negative post on that site.
The reason that there isn't a negative post on that site is the way that our moderators present everybody's post. We protect it. If we get someone who makes
What's
a
a
post,
moderator?
A moderator, I'm an administrator. Administrator owns the page. A moderator helps you approve members, which is a big key. A moderator checks in case there's an off-color remote, an off-color remark, or a commercial. We get commercial people who want to put commercial things, and we try to intercept that. Now, we do it differently than a lot of other groups do that. What we do, if someone puts a commercial ad, we don't remove it. I ask them to remove it. If somebody makes an inappropriate remark, of which we have only really had 2, and it was from a questionable member. They were a false member. They weren't really a person at all. It's one of these hackers probably. But when we get one like that, we will tell them to remove their post themselves. And we will explain it to them why we want it. Consequently, no arguments.
You know, interestingly, I've seen, what I like about the page is that pictures that people have in their basements or in their box of photos of stuff in Hagerstown or not in Hagerstown that are just interesting history that they post out there. I have seen so many interesting posts. And, you know, I liken it when I was explaining it to somebody the other day. I said, you know, you never get angry in an ice cream store. Sure. And this feels like the ice cream store to me, or maybe even the search, you know, kind of the treasure hunt kind of thing.
Yes.
Because you never know when you're going to go in there and you're going to find something that has meaning to you. And I think it's hard to find fault with that, and hopefully that's part of your success as well.
Well, it is. If you've noticed on our site, one of the things I asked a few months ago, I said, I want a piece of candy. Where would I go to buy a piece of candy? And I said, I don't care if I have time or place. Just tell me where I could get a good piece of candy. It's still going on. People are telling me about Hennikel's Market. They're telling me about, oh my golly, Lewis's Market. They're telling me about Hall's Store. So I'm getting history, and I'm getting new people.
And they told you about Wilson's store.
They told me about
of course.
Wilson's store. They sure did, yes. And so, I mean, we've done that. We've done where to get a cold bottle of pop. So people have been telling us, oh, this had the coldest pop, or they had the coldest pop.
You never hear pop anymore. do
No, you never hear pop.
And you know, the really amazing thing, because I'm a transplant, I moved here in the early 70s, but I see things, and I see a post, like, I read it off to my wife. I said, does this ring any bells to you? You know, it might be a building where there no longer is a building. I think recently there were some postings about the Governor Hamilton's house.
Absolutely.
And it's like, well, it's not there anymore. It's a shame because the piece of history is not there anymore.
Yes.
And it's been bulldozed and lost to history. So you see things, and it's like, man, it's a completely different feel of what Hagerstown was back then. We were talking about the Dagmar, I believe, recently.
Yes.
And then I think maybe you researched and you put a picture of the actual Dagmar car that was made in Hagerstown. So, it's those interesting things that really tie you back to the community. It's not something to argue about.
Right.
It's our history and what we've done, and it's not bad that some things have changed through the years.
Oh, it's not. That's a great thing that you brought up, because we had Mike Doyle did a great expose on, he took a couple pictures of West Washington Street and Tatum Street from like the 30s. And then he went and took the same angle picture of it today.
Right.
Posted them side by side. It was a most interesting thing. It was fantastic. We got a huge amount of response from it. In fact, we get so many responses from that. I think we have somewhere around 87% of our members actually post. And that's unheard of.
That is unheard of. And they're posting positive, which
They're
is
posting positive.
even more unheard of.
Well, no, I would really like to take exception to that. Most people are good on social media. Our problem is that if you choose to look for the negative, if you choose to look for a dark, you're going to find it. And it's going to be darker than what you thought. It's going to be more negative than what you thought, and that's going to sell.
Yeah. Well, we have media companies that build their bottom lines over selling things that are...
Absolutely. Our social media is the new local newspaper.
Yeah.
And politicians and government people who are controlling things really ought to take their time and get on a few of these sites. You get insights from your constituents that you would never get. And you find that those people are real.
Well, some would argue that there's some politicians that spend too much time on those sites.
If you look for that negative stuff, you're most certainly going to find it.
But, I remember there was a discussion about the old Manbeck bread
Absolutely.
plant. Okay, you drive down and the aroma coming off the plant, it triggers a memory response of bread coming off of the line.
And there was a negative angle to that also. There was a sad part. It wasn't a negative part so much as it was a sad part. That was one of the area businesses that under the old laws, the company could borrow money against the retirement program of their workers.
Okay.
That happened. That's a real thing that happened. It happened to my father in the steel mill. It happened to thousands of people, and they lost those things like that. But you know what? No one had a negative response about that. They actually understood it. The common man understood what happened. It is the people that really look for the negative or the dark that won't understand things like that, or don't want to take the time, or have some sort of axe to grind that brings up that negative atmosphere. We try to avoid that by, if someone goes along that way, I'll make a joke. If you're going to be successful in these groups, you really have to take an active part. You can't just do it, get a bunch of members, and then sit back and watch the arguments. It doesn't have to be an argument. It can be the kitchen table. You can talk at the kitchen table. One person can like something and another person can like something else, but when the meal is done, you're still family. You're still neighbors. You're still friends.
So, and I absolutely agree with everything you said there. There are those. Well, let me ask it this way: what do you think? Why do you think some people, in your opinion, only want to present the negative side? And again, not on your site, but if you look at some of these other sites, because there are people on Facebook where if you said it was sunny and 60 this morning, they would take issue with it.
Jim, why do people commit a senseless crime?
Okay.
A lot of times they feel they're anonymous. They feel that the computer they can take on any persona that they wish to have, and they can get away with it, so to speak. They'll think, they can take the persona of an immature person, or they can take the persona of a racist. But the truth of the matter is they may not really be like that in their day life. But this computer is so impersonal that if you find sites that are impersonal and allow you to pursue that way, they will follow that. They will follow that darkness inside, and then it becomes them. And that's why they post.
Do you see, your site is on, or at least the one I'm familiar with, is on Facebook.
Yes.
Are there any of the other social media outlets that you find any interest in?
Well, I have been on most of them looking. There was a one before Facebook was called MySpace.
Right.
MySpace was a very friendly atmosphere. It was very similar to Facebook. Now you've got these Twitters and this Instagram, and those type of social media outlets really lend themselves to the anonymous. They lend themselves that people can sign up with an account. They only have 167 characters. They can be who they want to be. They can be as dark as they want to be because they think when they turn that computer off, that's the end of it. So it is what you look for. And those kind of social medias, they have a place in our world because you can get the news quickly. But they also have a danger in our world that they make us impersonal. They forget that we're friends, and they don't act like we're friends anymore.
And not everything they post is true, which is
Well, not everything everybody posts is true. I'm a pretty big storyteller, and there's not too many of those stories I post. I do write about stories. I tell everybody it comes from an experience I had, but I tend to...
Embellish?
Embellish is a very good word. I've said a few other words than that, but embellish is a good word, yes.
What's next? Where do you see Hagerstown Times? Where do you hope to see Hagerstown Times? Let's say end of the year. Where would you like to see it?
Well, at the end of the year, we're going to have our big picnic. It's going to be a free community old-time picnic. We're going to have it in Williamsport, and if you're a member of the club, the group, come to the picnic. Yes. Everything's going to be free. If you can bring a covered dish, bring a covered dish. Have a good time. We'll enjoy each other. And next year, I hope for it to be bigger.
Okay. Why did you spell time different?
Because I didn't want it to be one of the groups that just put a lot of old pictures, a lot of school pictures, a lot of grandmother pictures on. I wanted it to be a group that talked about the past, the present, and was looking forward to the future. So we called it Times, the experience of our life.
Very interesting.
All right. Well, Pat, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. And maybe if you'd come back and visit us again sometime. And tell
I
us
would
what
be
the next
happy.
step.
We'll have lots of stuff to come back to.
Excellent. All right. And we hope you will come back and visit us here in about 3 minutes. Fast 5 is coming up next. Welcome to Fast 5, where our 3 panelists talk about 5 topics in 7 short minutes. Let's get started. Some job seekers are still facing challenges despite historically low unemployment rates. Ron, what's up with that?
Well, you're always going to have a problem when a person's educated for what they went to school to become a career and can't find a job in their career path. So some days you wonder why go to college and take all these different diversified subjects, but ultimately it pays off to take them. But you're at a point now where a lot of people with those kind of jobs keep them. They hang on to them.
So you're saying, in your view, it's probably structural unemployment, meaning we have the jobs, we just don't have the people to fill them.
You have the jobs and they say you don't have the qualified people, but then again, it's probably a reason why people don't take the job. Probably have no benefits, probably have working conditions may be okay, but it's benefit package. If you don't have a good benefit package, and we've all been in the job market without a benefit package, what good is a job sometimes? if you have a family.
Well, I sort of think on the other side is I think this digital age has changed a lot of things. We have filters that are screening resumes as you send them in. There may be a person with a plethora of background and experience, but because they do not have a certain acronym behind their name or a certain degree from an institution, it causes challenges for them to get out into the market and not be readily accepted. But they bring 20 years of experience to the table, but because they didn't finish a bachelor's degree or a master's degree or a PhD, oh, sorry, you're not qualified for that. And I think that's what some of the challenges are. And so you see some people saying, listen, I've done this job, I don't want to be underemployed. So they may be holding out for a better opportunity, and there might be, extended period of time. So I think that's one of the really big challenges, the way that we are, because computers, they just scan the resume and they'll decide what the recruiter actually sees.
You've been in a hiring process over the years yourself.
Yes.
Did you look down on a person that was overqualified to take a job?
No, but what I'm saying is today they have computer screeners before it even gets to...
No, but I'm saying you personally.
Me personally?
Yeah, when you saw a person that had all kind of degrees...
Well, one of the concerns is how long are they going to stay? Because you make a capital investment in your employees. How long is that individual going to stay at my company, and what are they going to contribute? Because I may not... If they have all this experience, why are they looking for a job here when they should be here?
Maryland lawmakers are ready to ban foam food containers. Henry, what say you?
We know styrofoam is not good for the environment, but responsible disposal of any trash addresses a huge hurdle in what some of this problem contains. It's going to be an increased cost to us because plastic, paper cups are significantly more expensive than styrofoam. When I say significantly, we're talking 3-4 times the cost going out. Is that going to hurt a bottom line of someone who's serving styrofoam now? Your to-go containers are going to be paper products versus having styrofoam. It's what it is, but I think we really make a lot of do about nothing.
Ron?
Well, I listened to the $15 an hour minimum wage deal, and it says it's going to affect somebody like McDonald's. What's McDonald's use now?
Paper.
Paper. They use paper, so it's not going to affect them at all. But there's also now a way that there's a chemical breakdown of styrofoams and plastic that you're going to find people rushing to get styrofoam and plastic, to put it through this process of a breakdown that can use other things and will not be pelletized, but it can go back into making the product for the restaurants to use. So I see there's going to be a major shift, because the question really was, is it profit that's the problem, or what is it? The state of Maryland has aggressively going after it. Will we go after recycling? Absolutely not, because our community, Boonesboro will go after recycling in a heartbeat. Will the rest of the county go after it? Probably not. Will the state? Yes. Should we? Absolutely should, but we won't until it's forced upon us someday.
So actually, you jumped into our next topic. Thank you for that on recycling. The recycling, it's the question that is being posed is it about the planet or is it about a profit? Apparently, recycling has become a very profitable endeavor.
Recycling has always been a very profitable endeavor. And there was an excellent, I forget what channel it was on, excellent documentary about recycling and how much there's profit margins, not to the individual, but to some to the municipalities, but more to the people who actually do the processing. Why does it cost more to buy recycled paper than regular paper? We need to fix that issue. Once we fix that issue, then that profit margin is going to disappear from them.
All right, quickly, we've only got about a minute left. Washington County economic growth leads the state. What? Did you see that one, Ron?
I did. It doesn't surprise me, because years ago we made a conscious decision to diversify, not depending just on manufacturing.
And now
leading
that's paying
the state,
off.
it's on services, it's on a wholesale number of things. years later, that decision to diversify is paying off.
Okay. Henry?
I think it's excellent. This is a great place to live, and the numbers are starting to show it.
Okay. Last topic. A teen got in-school suspension because of hair highlights. Ron, what say you?
I'm going to turn this one over to
Oh, because you're just going from last week.
on the dress.
But this is public school.
Okay.
Okay, this is public school. Again, I think it's completely ludicrous. I didn't read anything regarding that there was anything in the school rules that prohibited hair highlights. So why in the world single out this girl and cause an issue?
So hopefully she can keep her blonde hair and wear slacks.
Well, in public school, that shouldn't be a problem.
We hope so. Okay, well, that's all the time we have tonight. We hope you will follow us on Facebook. We hope you will like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter. We also hope you will send us your comments and suggestions to feedback@theflipsidetv.com. That's feedback@theflipsidetv.com. Most importantly, we hope you will join us again next week for another trip to the flip side. Good night.